Okay, so today I'd like to try something new and interview someone on the front lines, so to speak. Having finished my high school education about 25 years ago makes me a little out of touch. So I've reached out to a subscriber of mine. Now he's not anonymous, he's going to put his real name out there. He's going to tell you where he lives. Yeah, I think this could be an interesting conversation for people who are interested in this kind of thing. So, Cody, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Cody Bowman. I'm a high school student in Year 12. I live about 2 hours drive from Melbourne. I'm also a hip hop artist, and I guess I've seen the culture change, especially within the youth uh, over the most recent times.
Okay.
I came from a single mother family without a father, and yeah, that's about it.
Righto. That's good. So let's dive into the what's going on at high school. Could you just give us a rundown of the subjects that you're doing, and then we might dive into like specific subjects and what's going on in a classroom.
At high school, I'm studying two IT classes, uh, maths, literature, and media.
Math, literature, and media. Okay, so let's you've got two IT subjects, so let's dive into your IT subject. What's going on in there?
My main IT subject, which is called informatics,
Yep.
has been the IT class has been changed from the previous year, so it's a brand new class. The previous year was basically all IT stuff. This year it's partly research, partly IT stuff. However, in the textbook, there are various things that are not really related to any of the two, such as language policing and thought policing.
Ooh, this is the juicy stuff. So so this is actually in the textbook, right?
Yes,
It's part of the
there
textbook,
is.
and
There's tons of it.
all right, and the I mean, is this something that's because often with textbook, well, as I remember it in high school, textbooks are sometimes used as a guide. Sometimes teachers are just fucking lazy and they, they just get kids to read out of the textbook because they can't be asked teaching. So is this something that the it's just in there as sort of supplementary, or is it something that the teacher kind of gets involved in and rams down your throat?
I've got to be honest, the teacher has never even showed us this part of the textbook because I feel that the teacher thinks it's bullshit too.
That's good to hear. So why don't you give us some examples of this stuff?
One of the examples is in relation to gender pronouns. There is a little table here that I guess instructs people to use the right terminology. For example, mankind must be changed to humanity or humankind. I think any idiot knows that mankind is short for humankind. You're just shortening it a few letters.
Yeah, I think just this is disturbing, Cody. You're 18 years of age and you've already got internalized misogyny. Keep going.
Manpower must be workers or personnel. The man in the street must be the average citizen or ordinary people, even if he is a man. But how would I know? I wouldn't be able to assume his gender. Sportsmanlike must be fair or sporting. Policeman, fireman, mailman, fisherman must be police officer, firefighter, postie, postal worker, or angler, actress, or aviatrix, which I think is the female version of aviator. Uh, but actress was always the female one anyway. So I'm not sure why they're changing it to actor, which was the male one. I have no idea. Man hours must be work hours, and spokesman must be representative.
Oh, actor. So did you say they want to change actress to actor? Was that one of them?
Yeah.
I guess
so they want.
Yeah, they want to get rid of the division. They just want to say that everybody's an actor, perhaps.
Yeah.
I guess because if you call, I guess it's the same with waiter and waitress. I guess somehow it's demeaning to be a waitress and a waiter. Who the fuck knows how this works? It's just...
Well, traditionally, actor was the male terminology. So you would think, because it was sexist, that they would make it actress, and everyone would have to be an actress.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
Yeah, but I guess actor doesn't contain the word man, so it's fine.
Yeah.
There's probably someone out there that knows. There's probably someone typing in the comments right now. No, actor comes from... Yeah, okay, we get it. Yeah, but it's a bit like that... You know that Billy Connolly joke where he said, they wanted to change manhole cover to personhole cover or something, and he said, when I see a woman go down one of those fucking things, then we'll change the name. Otherwise, it's a manhole cover.
Yeah.
And that kind of applies to a lot of those occupations, like firefighter. I think in the stats I looked at in the States, I think about 5% of women are firefighters. So it's fair enough. But see, I'm already using the politically correct term. I've already been indoctrinated. I'm just saying firefighters. Anyway,
are they going to change Fireman Sam to Fire Sam?
What was that? Say it again.
Are they going to change Fireman Sam to Firefighter Sam, or Postman Pat to Postal Office Worker Pat?
I guess they'll have to. They'll have to. What other choice do they have? We have to be politically correct. What other nonsense has you got in that book?
It's got a few definitions. The difference between sex, gender, and gender identity. I have no idea why gender identity is in here. I understand that sex and gender, I guess, are different things, but personally, I believe that everyone should either choose male or female, even if they are biologically... I don't want to say deformed, because that's probably a bit rude.
Yeah, what you mean, someone who's got Klinefelters or something, or
yeah, like an extra chromosome or a missing chromosome, which I guess they are deformities in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, well, they are. Fuck. I mean, do we want to go down this route? But they're obviously a mutation. Oh fuck! Here we go. Mutation. That's out there now. I said they're mutants. But yeah, I mean, there is a separate category for people who don't fall into that, but they are very, very rare instances. And it's usually often it's someone who might have a undescended testicles and half of a developed vagina or something. Those kind of people exist. So that's a tough one. But
so on here it says sex is a person's biological characteristics, and that is 100% true. However, I'm not sure why an IT textbook needs to tell people that. I think that people know that from basically kindergarten.
Yeah, we have to. Yeah, just to remind people, we're talking about IT here, not biology.
And then it says gender is the way in which a person identifies or expresses their masculine or feminine characteristics. Well, I don't agree with that, because that otherwise you would have people that were sort of like half man, half woman because they're partly feminine. For example, I'm not a huge sports fan, so that means I would be part feminine, which is ridiculous because I'm not a woman.
Yeah. Well, so what is the point of putting this in the textbook? I mean, how does it relate? Does it relate to anything in IT? How does this feed into IT?
It absolutely does not relate to anything IT based. I think if they're going to put this in a textbook, it would be a useless gender studies textbook.
But so there's like in the textbook, how do they? I mean, it's obviously there's this heading there with why it's there. I mean, does it go on to say that this is you need to consider these things when you're developing a website or what?
It basically says that you shouldn't offend anyone, and you should try to appeal to all people. Well, I don't agree with that. I don't want to appeal to all people.
Yeah.
I want to appeal to a selective audience, and that's how marketing works. You don't want to appeal to absolutely everyone, unless of course you're taking Apple's approach, which is sort of failing.
Well, I mean, if you're selling toilet paper, you might want to appeal to everyone. Everybody's got to wipe their ass. But yeah, of course, you've got select markets. I mean, you're interested in hip hop, so I assume if you build a site about that, you're not interested in the classical music segment.
And hip hop is it's a black male dominated industry. So it's not aimed at white women, even though there are white women hip hop artists, but it's not aimed at white women.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to correct you there. There are some white bitches and hoes, so I think it is aimed towards someone.
I guess the thing with hip hop is they sort of look at it and say it's a very diverse and accepting culture, but from my point of view, I actually view some of it as quite racist and quite sexist.
Yeah, well, that's a common criticism. But so again, yeah. So let's go back there. You said basically you shouldn't offend anyone. I mean, this is amazing, isn't it? This is in an IT textbook that you shouldn't offend anyone. That you should really. Why is that in a fucking IT textbook? What else has it got there?
Just back to that gender thing. It says gender identity is a person's deeply held internal and individual sense of gender. So they feel like they're a gender. So that means that they're that gender, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, it feels before facts.
The next point is intersex, which I believe is I guess people with extra chromosomes or something. Yeah. It also says that the main thing is that you do not want to make anyone feel excluded from your audience.
Of course.
What's the point of having an audience then?
Yeah. Well, this is a strange idea on the left where they talk about inclusivity whilst dividing everybody up into categories and treating them differently, which I think is just absolutely, I mean, it's the height of hypocrisy to say that we want to be inclusive and include everyone whilst simultaneously telling them that they're all different and that, some people deserve preference because they're different. And this is their approach to inclusivity. It's quite the mental gymnastic feat to come up with that.
Then it goes on to say that you do not want to offend anyone on the basis of their race, ethnicity, nationality, language, culture, religion, attitudes, beliefs, customs, gender, sexual preference, gender identity, appearance, dietary preferences, disabilities, illnesses, martial status. I don't even know what martial status is.
Marital status.
Age.
Marital.
Marital.
Yeah.
Marital. Yeah, that's what it says. Age, income, or education level.
Yeah, so basically don't tell any fucking jokes at all. Don't make any kind of statements about society or social groups or issues, because that, pretty much if you mention someone of a different race, nationality, educational level to your own, somebody will get offended. This is this hyper offense taking that we've become used to on the left. So you can imagine how fucking bland and boring your website would be if you followed these guidelines, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and there are a lot of websites that do follow those guidelines, particular government websites, and when you're reading it, it's just so boring.
Yeah, that's why they probably got an awful hit rate. People go there just to be bored out of their skulls.
And on note to offending people based on their nationality. Well, if I say Australia is arguably one of the best countries in the world, I can back that up, and that's sort of true. It is one of the best countries in the world. It is far better than North Korea. It is far better than many countries in Africa and South America and Asia. I can back that up. But is that being offensive?
Oh,
I don't really know.
I think that might even put you in the white supremacist category these days. It seems... yeah, go ahead.
But that's the thing, though. Like, when you say America's great, or if you say Australia's great, they automatically assume that you're talking about white people. Whereas Australia's, I think, the most multiculturalist country in the world. We have people from all different races and backgrounds. So to say that it's white supremacy is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Maybe idea supremacy, saying one idea is better than the other, which some ideas are better than others.
Yep. Well, you're not allowed to say that, but it's absolutely true. All cultures are equal. We should accept everybody as they are, even if you want to cover up your women and you want to kill everyone that doesn't submit to your religion. Hey, that's just their culture. Get on board, Cody. Don't you know?
It then goes on to say, just be considerate and sensitive. And sensitive. Does it really want people to be sensitive?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, who wrote this text? I don't know how many women subscribers I have at this stage, but I think they must be dwindling. But that just sounds like it was either written by a woman, when they talk about sensitivity, or a cuck, basically. A cuck. And there's plenty of those around these days, so I shouldn't say it was probably written by a woman.
And then it goes on to say, in my opinion, a sort of sexist statement, and it's not even backed up by evidence. If it was backed up by evidence, I would say, okay, I'm with you, you're correct, but it's not backed up by evidence, so it's sort of a pointless statement. Sexist language expresses bias in favor of one sex and treats another in a discriminatory manner. In most cases, sexist language benefits males at the expense of females. Well, if they can get some data on this, I'll be like, sure, okay, we need to do something about that.
Yeah, it's really weird. I mean, they count things like, you may have seen the Australian of the Year, David Morrison, who came out with a campaign about language in the workplace. And it was all about how the poor women's were oppressed. I made a video on this, actually. And one of the complaints was that I think to describe sort of an assertive female, certain words would be used for females that are not used for males. So, bitchy, or I can't off the top of my head think about the exact words. I mean, that's right. You probably wouldn't call a male bitchy, but the thing is, there are other words that you would use for males, like you'd call them an arrogant prick or something like that, which is something you wouldn't say of a female. So every time, of course, but this is what feminists do. They only concentrate on the female side. They don't ever actually consider anything from the male point of view. So, there are sort of words that are used exclusively for women, I think, that can be derogatory. But there are equally on the other side words that are used exclusively for men. And as maybe we can get into this, but certainly from my generation, we definitely always treated women kinder and gentler with language. I mean, I was brought up with a father who said, "Don't talk like that in front of your mother." I mean, that was a sort of a standard thing. You know, you had to talk differently in front of females. And I think if women actually got the equality of men talking to them the way they talk to each other, Jesus Christ, they really wouldn't like that. They'd be freaking out, and they'd have to go to the psych ward.
Yeah. I think men are quite savage when they talk to each other, but it's all done in a comical, humorous, in a comical, humorous way. So it's sort of like being accepted in a way.
Yeah, that's right. There's I think I talked about this with Dave Cullen from Computing Forever recently about that banter, the idea that men give each other shit, is a form of acceptance amongst young guys. Like the new guy comes, you know, and you show him around the school, and he sits with you at lunch for a week, and then he starts joining in the conversations, and then he starts to get a bit of shit like everybody else, and that's a form of acceptance. Yeah. Anyway, so IT. Is there anything left that you wanted to hit there in the IT subject?
There was a law in particular which I disagree with this law for a few reasons. On the 1st of August of 2014, the law passed. It was basically you cannot discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, or intersex status under federal
just
law.
to interrupt you, you're reading this from your textbook now?
Yes.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, keep going.
Your solution, which is your website, I guess, when being gender inclusive, should also keep in mind the Human Rights Commission, the Australian Human Rights Commission. My problem with this is if you list on a website, now it's illegal, if you have a form and it's got options male or female, if you do not have a third option saying other or prefer not to say, then you're automatically put into the bigoted sexist category, even if what you might be doing is researching data. And if people can choose their genders, then it's going to skew the data.
Absolutely, yeah.
There is some research that suggests that on average men are better at certain things and women are better at certain things.
Well, and this is the funny thing is with the left, the common saying is the left always eats itself, because if you think about something like the gender pay gap, which is a non-event and doesn't really exist. Now, what about if people just start identifying as Z or something like that? That's just going to totally throw the gender pay gap out. No one's going to know who the old categories of categorization. You're not going to be able to make comparisons to, because everybody's identifying as attack helicopters or whatever. And the data's going to be skewed. So I wonder. I guess the way to get around this would be to ask two questions: biological sex, and then gender. And then when you come to do the research, you just throw the fucking gender data out because you don't give a fuck, and you just use biological sex. But I maybe people will get offended by being asked their biological sex. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. It then goes on to say a bit further down the thing, stuff related to culture. You should not harass or unfairly criticize anyone. Well, what's unfair criticism?
Exactly. Yeah, good point. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the best.
Keep going.
One of the best ways to help your audience feel safe is included to maintain your objectivity so that you share only the truth of your findings. Feel safe. Feel safe on the internet.
Jesus Christ.
It's ridiculous.
That is crazy stuff.
It then goes on to say if you portray God in human form, that might disturb certain Jewish people. If you draw a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad, that might disturb certain Muslim people.
Shit. Yeah.
Um, and then it says, you should avoid appropriating another culture's symbols, such as Native American headdresses or reproducing another nation's flag. And that's absolutely ridiculous. And I think, was it Adam Ant got slammed for being racist or something for using the Native American headdress for a fashion symbol or something?
Adam Ant. Jesus, that goes back. Was that for a particular song? Can't remember.
I'm not entirely sure. I just remember my mum talking about it because she's a huge Adam Ant fan.
Yeah.
But reproducing another nation's flag, I don't understand why that would be offensive.
No, it's pretty hard. I mean, actually, as a kid, I think I remember in school we had to, the Olympics would come around and you'd have, colouring in people's flags, it was like a thing that you did at school. Have a look at the flags. I mean, what's wrong with that? Learning what other people's flags look like and, what the symbols mean and all that. It's kind of like the same thing where you now can't ask anyone where they're from. This is now offensive. Like, particularly for someone like me, I've lived and travelled to pretty much most of Asia. I lived in a couple of countries, but travelled most of Asia. And so I can tell pretty much within 30 seconds, if I'm overhearing a conversation, I can tell if they're talking in Korean, I can spot it straight away. I can spot Japanese straight away. I can spot Thai straight away. I can spot I can't distinguish between Malaysian and Indonesian because they're pretty similar. Vietnamese even has a very sort of specific tone. Lao is kind of like Thai, so it's kind of indistinguishable, really, unless you know it well. Cambodian, I've kind of forgotten. Chinese is obviously quite different. And it's always it's always a point of interest to me if I meet an Australian who obviously looks Asian, and they talk completely like they were born here, then I don't bother with those kind of questions. But if someone's got an accent, it's interesting to me. I'd like to know where you come from because maybe I can say, hey, I've been there. We might have something in common. To me, this is how you get to know people. You ask them these kind of questions. The idea that it's offensive to ask someone where they come from is really strange to me.
Yeah. So by that logic, if the police ask where my address is, I can just say, oh no, that's offensive, I can't tell you.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
And then this is a bit of a laugh. It honestly baffles me why they would please homophobes, but they said, some people are affronted by images of non-heterosexuality, sexual innuity, or full or partial nudity.
Full or partial?
So now we're trying to please the homophobes.
Jeez.
Which I thought that's what they were against.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. What are they trying to... So what do they mean? Like that two guys kissing or something, and someone might get offended by that?
Well, it says a non-heterosexuality. So they could. Well, it depends what sexuality is. They could be hugging, they could be kissing, or they could be just holding hands. And honestly, none of that offends me, and it shouldn't offend anyone else for that matter.
I guess there's a certain element of the conservative Christian lobby that finds that a bit icky, but yeah, who gives a fuck? Get over it.
Yeah, but personally, I feel that anyone just sticking their tongues down each other's throats in public is a bit gross, but that's the thing with a free society. They have the freedom to do that.
Yeah.
People like me have the freedom to look away.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I spent 13 years in Japan, and people, you'll see young couples walking down the street holding hands, but you don't see people getting stuck into each other, like full-on tongue kissing on the street or in a park or something. You just don't see it. Japanese a little bit more modest than that, and it's actually, for me to come back to Australia, and it's not like I see it all the time, but I kind of go, ugh, Jesus. Doesn't matter what your sex is. It just seems kind of gross to me. Get a fucking room.
Mm. And then it goes on to comment on language. What constitutes as swearing can be culturally specific. What seems harmless to you, such as OMG, I don't know how OMG can be harmful, can be blasphemous to others.
Yep.
Humor is another ingredient best left out of global presentation.
That's fucking stunning, isn't it? Jesus. They just want a society of bland robots that, they want us all to be Spock, I think. They want us to live on Vulcan, and I don't know.
But humor, I think humor is what brings different nationalities together.
Yeah, well,
so you get a comic like Carl Barron, for example. He makes jokes about different nationalities. I don't think anyone's ever called him a racist for it, and I don't see why they would. But there are certain elements of there are certain differences in different nationalities that are funny.
Yeah. There's a guy. I guess it's that old thing now as well. But there's one of the world's most successful comedians. I think his name is Peters, Russell Peters. Now he's he's of mixed personality, a mixed background, and I think he gets away with it a lot because he's of that mixed background, and because he's been brought up in different cultures, and he understands, he's got a pretty broad understanding of ethnic backgrounds. He gets away with it because it's okay. This guy's a minority. He can do it. But I think increasingly, if you're white, especially, obviously, it's harder to do. But if you have a look at, in your spare time, anyone out there listening, go and have a look at Russell Peters. Now, he will talk to he's doing huge audiences, huge arenas, and lots of Asian people in the audience, and he just really sticks it to them with, accents and all kinds of things. And they love it. They absolutely love it because, it's accurate. It's a caricature, but it's accurate. And that's and they identify with it, and they can laugh at themselves, and it's funny, and it's not done in a malicious manner, and so there's nothing wrong with it. But that's sad that we seem to be losing that. I think what you've read out in that textbook is basically don't fucking do anything. Just put some text on a page that doesn't mention anything.
Yeah, and it also says in a lot of the it says it not directly, but it means that do not state your opinion.
Yeah.
And it I think if you back it up with facts, it's fine. However, sometimes it's hard to back up opinions with facts. For example, my favorite color is blue. I don't know how to back that up. It's just my opinion. It's something that you can't really back up. It's like religion. It's just a belief. You can't necessarily 100% back up why that's your view.
Well, keep going.
It has an example of an incorrect sentence and a correct sentence. The incorrect sentence is as follows. 21% of respondents admitted trying a paleo diet because of a TV chef conned them into it. The correct sentence is 21% of respondents reported trying a paleo diet in response to TV or other promotions. I honestly think the first one's a bit more, it draws you in a bit more to read an article if it was titled that.
But see, I think when you get into interpretation, I think what you should be going for is accuracy. I mean, were they conned, or were they, did they go, oh, that sounds interesting? I mean, that's the, I think that's what's important. I mean, that should be important when it comes to, say, journalistic integrity, but that is sadly lacking in the world today. But yeah, I think what's true, I mean, this is always the easiest to me. It's fuck off with spin. What is true? What is accurate? That's the way to do it. But it's just that it's prescribing thought, isn't it? Not only thought, but expression. It's prescribing how people should express themselves, and that's really annoying, because I don't have a problem with people spouting off opinions with no evidence to back them up. I'm glad people do that, because then you can shoot them down. I mean, that's the whole point of discourse, and that's how you change people's minds, because you do confront them and say, yeah, I heard what you said, but this data that I have here shows that what you've just said is, not true. So what do you think about that? That's the point of letting people say things. That's the point of, say, in Europe, of course, they have these silly rules about you can't deny the Holocaust. Now, of course, denying the Holocaust is a ridiculous position to take, but I like people to say ridiculous things out loud, precisely because they can be shot down in the public arena and made to look silly. And then they might, I mean, they probably, they might stick with their position, but they might change their mind once they see, and once they've been humiliated, once they've seen that the vast majority of people, and if they have the wherewithal to actually look at the evidence rather than just stick to their silly ideological position. But I'm rambling on. Sorry, mate. Keep going.
One thing I find interesting about that topic is that the rapper B.O.B. on Twitter, he posted a bunch of tweets saying that human cloning is a thing and it's happening, and saying the Earth was flat and all this conspiracy theory type stuff. And if you actually look at the flat Earth theory, the math shows that the Earth is flat, but you can apply the same math to show that the Earth is round.
Right. I'm going to take your word
But
for
I think that if you just go to a beach and look at the boats go across the horizon, you can tell that it's round just by the bottom disappearing away first.
Right.
But I think people like that should be allowed to express their thoughts and opinions.
Well, of course they should. I mean, and this discussion about whether they should be allowed to or shouldn't, I mean, we shouldn't even be having it. It should just be a given. But unfortunately, in this day and age, it isn't. How about are we done with IT? Or you got any more?
Yeah.
You done with IT? So let's move on to, I think you mentioned media class. Oh, just before we get off IT, now you said, right, that the teacher is not, he's just avoiding that shit. He doesn't care. He just gets on with teaching the IT stuff.
Well, it's in the textbook, but I don't believe it's in the curriculum. It hasn't come up on any test or any work.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Which is good, because it's absolutely useless and meaningless to the actual topic. And the teacher, when he looked at the textbook, he was just like, this new textbook is bullshit. It is absolute bullshit. And what they try to do with textbooks, and I think they've been doing it years, is if you go to the contents on a lot of school textbooks, it will tell you what pages different topics are at. And at the start of one page, it will have one topic, and then it will go to the end of that topic, then skip a few pages and go to the next topic. The pages in between, which is the gap, is just meaningless crap that hasn't. It's just filler to I guess allow the bookmakers to make a bit more profit.
I see. Um, all right then. Well, that's good that that teacher's not buying into the bullshit. So let's move on to media. What's going on there?
Media is an interesting class. The first half of the year, we were looking at the change in time in movies. I guess in particular, we were looking at how the use of time in a technical manner. So, for example, in Back to the Future, which was one of the films that we looked at how they used time to persuade the audience that all this stuff was happening all at the same time, when on camera it was shown all at different times, but it gave the audience a feel that it was happening all at the same time. That's a technical thing. However, the second half of the year, we've been looking at gender representation and social type stuff in films. One of the films that we studied was Aliens, which shows various aspects of first wave feminism, the original feminism, which that was good feminism because it allowed women, I guess, to get out of the traditional home, even though I believe women were working prior to that movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But then we looked at a very strange movie called Predestination.
Ah, yes. Yep.
And I'm not sure why or how we were trying to tie that into gender. It was, I guess, it was about a person who was forced to have a sex change after having a child. And the child happened to be her. Very, very bizarre movie.
Yep.
And when she turned into a male, the hormones or the testosterone that she was given to make her voice sound deeper didn't really work, so she had to make her voice sound deeper. And I guess that was a stab at trans people. If they get a sex change and they can take so much hormones or testosterone to make their voice sound like the opposite sex, it's not necessarily going to persuade anyone.
No.
With Caitlyn Jenner, for example, I don't think anyone in their right mind seriously thinks that she was born a woman.
No, and I have no hate in my heart for adult transgender people who want to do this, want to change their sex. I don't care. It's none of my business. Go for your life. But some of them make these, and it's most of the time it's men, doing the Caitlyn Jenner routine. And they look absolutely awful. I mean, they look ugly. This is not, this is just a judgment about aesthetics here. They look awful, but they. I went to a YouTube channel the other day of a transgender person who, I'm going to use the word brave, putting up, this is what they're going through. They're through their transition. It's a guy transitioning to a woman, and putting up videos just talking about, the hormone treatment or whatever, and it's good on them. And I wish them all the best, and I hope they are healthy and happy. But this guy is horrendous looking. I mean, he's not even a good-looking guy. And then now he's a woman, he just looks even worse. And, you've got people in the comments saying, you're beautiful and wonderful. Now, I know they probably mean you're a beautiful person, but no, I mean, you really do look odd. And so that's when you walk down the street and you see someone like that, you can't help but do a double take, because that's a dude in a dress. And I know you've done your best to, look like a woman, sound like a woman even, but you're not pulling it off. That's the problem. And I don't think we should be, as I said, I'm completely accepting of your lifestyle choice, but I don't think we should be lambasted because we go, ooh, we have a sort of, Jesus, have a look at that. Or even if we have a little chuckle at the fact that this dude woman looks a little bit odd. I mean, it's just a natural reaction. But I digress.
This has been brought up on I guess the comments sections of Milo Yiannopoulos' Facebook posts. People often say, well, he's a gay guy, so why isn't he for the LGBTQIXYZ other letters movement? And I think it's to do with transgender people. I feel that some of them might be mentally ill in the sense that they think that they have to become something that they're not. And you can draw similarities between transgenderism and anorexia.
Right. Like, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's tricky when you get into the science here. I have to, say that I've only read a very small portion of the literature on this stuff, so I'm not really sure. I mean, as far as the DSM, the Diagnostic Manual in the United States, they classify gender dysphoria as a mental illness, but they go on to say that actually it's not identifying as the opposite sex that's the mental illness. It's all the related conditions that come along with that. So, for example, basic things like depression and anxiety, which we already recognise in some form are mental illnesses, right? If they're bad enough. But so that what they're saying is that identifying as the opposite sex is not a mental illness. It's the repercussions of that and trying to fit that into a society which is largely, sexually dimorphic setup. That brings on these other mental illnesses, which is it's a distinction that's worth noting, but it's kind of problematic. It's kind of, both sides of this debate use it to their advantage. So the anti-trans will sort of say they're just mentally ill and fucked up without looking at any of the rest of it, but then the pro-trans will just say, no, this is just a lifestyle choice. There's nothing, there's no problem with it. And then you have people who are saying that it's in the DSM because if it's not classed as a mental illness, then it won't be covered by healthcare. So I don't know. I think I've probably already said too much, and there's probably people typing away going, you don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, go ahead.
I sort of sit on the fence with that. I think some people genuinely choose that as a lifestyle choice, and they're sane, they're fine in the head. But I think some people are genuinely mentally ill. But I guess knowing which one's which, that's a whole different topic.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. So,
but back to the media gender representation. The teacher brought up on a website how some movies are 40% female and some movies are 20% female, and we've gotten more equal over the years, which is true. However, I don't look for a movie that has 50-50 gender representation. I just look for a good movie.
Yeah, who does? I mean, who does look that way? I mean, and the only people who do are the type of people who have been indoctrinated into this bullshit idea that you have to look for equal representation. I mean, the stunning part of this is it's just complete ignorance of how society works. There's not equal representation in anything. There's always disproportional representation. That's always been the way, and there's nothing wrong with that. And for some reason, women are only interested, or I shouldn't say women, feminists are only interested in disproportional representation when it's to their disadvantage. But they're fine with it when it comes to plumbers or cement mixer workers or whatever.
And my teacher brought up that someone in the government had a Senate that was 50% women, 50% men, and when someone asked the question, why do you have equal gender representation, the answer was, come on, it's 2016.
Yeah.
And I, I think that's sort of ridiculous. If naturally it happens 50-50, then let it be.
Mm.
But I think that we should, um, maybe in government it's a bit different. I feel that since there are more women than there are men, maybe it needs to be 60%, 60% to 40%. I don't really know, because in government, I guess the government sort of control what the society does, so it would be unfair to have a majority male government.
Um,
But then it also comes down to experience, quality of work, and all that.
sure it does, but remember that I think it's in Australia, what women are 51%, or there's a slight majority, so they get to vote, right? They get they get to vote for whoever they want. They get to run for pre-selection, and to become candidates. And the other thing that I think with this is as well is that it's a rather sexist position to take, because what the position says that you need sort of equal representation in Parliament is that it says that men are not capable of representing women's interests. And I would submit to you, when you think about the laws around child custody, the laws around marriage, the laws around I don't even know, alimony, what they call it in the United States. Australia, we call it something else, maintenance or something. These laws were passed largely by male legislatures, pushed through, many years ago, when I think today's House of Representatives in Australia is 28% female, and the Senate is just under 40%. If I'm not, the Senate's actually got quite a few women in it. It's around 40%. But I mean, these laws were passed years ago when female representation was probably in the single digits, and so the idea that men are incapable of sort of representing women's interests is just not supported by history. I mean, men have voted, against their own interests when it comes to child custody and other issues. And I mean, look at the way, for example, that health dollars are divided up. I mean, women get way more funding for research into things like breast cancer or ovarian cancer, when the facts show, at least in Australia, and I think Peter Lloyd in his book Stand By Your Manhood pointed out that men are more likely to die of every unisex type of cancer, that is, cancers that affect both sexes. The men have, in general, worse health outcomes than women, yet women get something like, in the UK, I think his figures were £8 for every pound spent on men. Women get £8. So it's yeah, I mean, it's really weird that we would claim that women's interests are not being represented by a majority male parliament. I mean, Christ, I think if you had more liberal, sort of conservative-minded female MPs, it might actually be better for men. But my basic point is, as a principle for this whole thing, should be: look, the people who go into that job should be the people who want to. They should be the best candidates. They should be the ones that, they run around to the political party meetings for 10 years, greasing hands, getting to know people, doing the hard yards. You shouldn't be just handed a pre-selection ticket because you have a vagina, because you have a dick. These things are irrelevant. It should be who wants the job, who's willing to work for it. That's all it comes down to. And guess what? If it turns out that in 20 years' time that women, for some reason, have this unbelievable motivation to go into politics, and we end up with 70% women in the parliament, then so be it. I can't complain about that. If they want it more, they should have it. But
yeah. And I guess that also goes hand in hand with the whole the white evil people thing. It was slavery was around basically all over the world, but it was the first people to actually stop it, I believe, were white.
The British, I think, to stop it. Yeah.
And I think the British were also attacking American people simply to try and stop slavery in America. And it was men that gave women the vote. So to say that all white males are evil is just ridiculous.
Well, I think a lot of the American Revolution was about taxation without representation. I mean, the Crown back in England was, they wanted an increasing amount of taxation from the colonies in America because they were doing pretty well, and like, fuck this, what are we paying them money for, and we don't get anything back for it.
And as Milo Yiannopoulos points out, I think it was in on his YouTube channel a few days ago, that our society seems to point at all the horrendous thing that white people have done, that he thinks it's only fair, and I believe him, that it's only fair to point out all the great things that white people have done in history.
Oh yeah, Jesus. I mean, it's kind of it's the same argument that Camille Paglia makes. Camille Paglia is she's probably in her 60s by now, but she's an old school feminist who doesn't believe in any of this bullshit today, this third wave intersectional crap. And she says, her famous line, and it's trotted out quite often, which is that if women had been left in charge, we'd all still be living in grass huts. And you can say something similar if if white people hadn't evolved, if democracy hadn't evolved, if the Enlightenment hadn't come, the Reformation, I mean, we'd probably be further back than we are now.
And the interesting thing is that I think it was in China they developed gunpowder, and then I think it was the British the British discovered this, and then they took the gunpowder and made it better in such a short time.
Yeah. I mean, the Chinese were way ahead on lots of things thousands of years ago. I mean, they had a writing system, I believe, before anybody. There's probably someone telling me I'm wrong on that too, but they were well ahead. But cultures rise and cultures fall, and I mean, the Arabic culture was doing great. I mean, with mathematics, and then something happened there around the 7th century and just fucking kind of canned it all, and then set them back centuries. It was called Islam, if anybody was wondering what that was. Anyway, let's get back. We want to try and keep this reasonably condensed. So let's get back to media class and talking about where were we? Representation.
Yeah, gender representation. So we're looking at, I guess, feminism, and my teacher said that there is the glass ceiling. Is that what they call it? The glass ceiling?
Yeah.
The glass ceiling still exists today. Yes, there are examples of individual sexism, but to say that the whole society is sexist is completely wrong. And Australia had a female prime minister. That's, I believe, the highest position in Australia.
Yeah. Well, I think something like 50 countries around the world have now had a female head of state. Sorry, go on.
And then there's the Queen, which is, for those who don't know, I guess the person that rules over all of the Commonwealth. And I don't know how much power she has now, but I don't even know if there is a king or who the king is.
Well, as far as the Queen is still officially the head of state. This has been basically, she's been written out by law. So the Governor General represents her. So the Governor General is like the Queen's representative, and he has, the final seal when a law is passed, and he gets the stamp, boom, and this is kind of like the Queen's approval. But at the end of the day, the Queen is not consulted on Australian law. She doesn't, she has no say in government in Australian government affairs, and that's for, I'm assuming, every Commonwealth nation. So she doesn't have any say. She has no idea about what laws are being passed in Australia. No one asks her. No one asks her opinion. She's not involved. It's just a legacy from the fact that we are, at the end of the day, a colony, but we've developed into an independent nation. And at some point, we have had attempts to, back in the 90s, was it? We tried to become a republic, and that kind of failed. And that'll probably come up again at some point. Some point should probably just be written out. I think it's just a legacy of history, really.
And another thing the teacher was saying about the LGBTQI community is that it's a majority-held view, which I respectfully disagree with. Simply because when you say LGBT, I think a lot of people just say, "Oh, gay marriage." I think that's all they think.
Right. Yep.
I don't think many people go past the LGB part of it.
Yeah.
Where there are certain things like gender identity which falls under that group. I guess that's the left's thing. They want to group all of those type of people together, where one's gender identity and the other is sexual preference. They shouldn't be joined together. They're two different things.
Yeah, the left is kind of good at trying to shoehorn extra stuff in, like their so-called safe schools program, which Australians will be familiar with who are listening. But that it's shoehorned in under the guise of anti-bullying, but they're trying to tell, for example, that they're trying to tell 5 and 6-year-olds that or teachers that are teaching 5 and 6-year-olds not to call boys and girls, that kind of thing, which is it seems to me ridiculous. What's wrong with the old style of you let boys and girls just figure it out for themselves, and those kinds of questions should be dealt with by parents. I don't know why schools are in this business. Well, I do know why schools are in this business. If you read Ros Ward, who was the author of the Same Schools program, who is a avowed Marxist, she writes in a paper that she wrote some 20 years ago about how school should be about encouraging the next generation of activists. For her, this is an entire project to indoctrinate kids into a Marxist or communist way of thinking, so that they can rise up and overthrow the system.
Yeah, I don't think in a perfect world we wouldn't need activists.
In a perfect world,
so,
yeah.
So to suggesting that we need more activists is suggesting that we need to make society worse in order for that to happen.
Yeah, it's nutty thinking. So okay, we've got the of course the old trotted out, representation of women. What else have you got there in media?
The other thing in media is representation of race, and the teacher hasn't personally pointed it out, but some of the students have pointed it out, that some TV shows have a lot of white people in them, and and like the show Friends, for example, that's got a virtually all white cast, and then there's Seinfeld that's got a majority white cast. That's not because Jerry Seinfeld's a racist or anything. That's because that's just how it happened, and the people that he grew up around were majority of them were white people.
Yeah.
And to try and get equality in every single movie or song or whatever, you would have to work out the population statistics, and then just say in America it's 6% African American, then you would have to have 6% of the actors or the team making the movie African American, then you would have to break that down into sex and then break that down into every little thing you can think of.
Yeah.
And I'm quite happy where things are in regards to movies. I'm fine that some movies have more white people. I'm fine that some movies have more black people.
Oh yeah. I mean, the thing about it, I mean, okay, it's fine to point out Seinfeld and Friends, but what about Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, The Cosby Show? There's plenty of all black TV shows as well, and I think they even have their own black TV channel in the United States now. Here in Australia, of course, we have the government-funded SBS, which is all about, pretty much the whole thing is about minorities. And so
the NITV,
yeah,
which is National Indigenous Television.
Really, we have one. I didn't know about that one. That's is it government funded, that one? I assume it is.
I would assume, well, it's on free-to-air TV, so it would be government funded. I think it branches off SBS or ABC or something.
Right. Yeah. But again, it goes back to this idea that, look, people aren't, like, the Seinfeld series is based on his life, and he lived in New York, and he lived next door to a guy, this kind of weird fucking guy, which was obviously Kramer. Elaine represents some woman that it's based on a composite of someone he know. But I mean, this is where he lived. He lived in this comedian scene. The people he hung out with were whites. I mean, this is not. It shouldn't be news to anyone that white people tend to hang around white people and black people tend to hang around black people. And yes, we mix and match. We've got friends from different races, but there are tendencies and there are reasons for that. And there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, if you're going to apply this United Colors of Benetton fucking test to everything, you ever seen those United Colors of Benetton ads? There's always a black guy, there's an Asian chick, and there's a white girl, and there's one of everything. But
yeah,
it's artificial and it's forced. That's what's wrong about it. It isn't an accurate reflection of society. And I think, again, it goes back to, what are you interested in? Are you interested in truth? Are you interested in accuracy? Or are you interested in some fantasy utopia that actually doesn't exist, but you want to ram down other people's throats?
And there's a there's a study that shows the so-called institutional racism in the workplace towards Aboriginal people.
Right.
And that's why that in some universities, if you're an Aboriginal, your ATAR score, which is the score that you get once you've finished all your exams, and they get all the scores and put them all together, and that tells you how well you have done academically. If you are an Aboriginal person, your ATAR score will be boosted a little bit. If you live in a rural area, your ATAR score will be boosted a little bit. If you have members with disabilities that you need to look after, your ATAR score will be boosted a little bit.
Right.
Personally, I am against any ATAR boost. I don't really care what your struggle is. The fact is that you haven't met the set ATAR score for this certain university course. I think that the ATAR scores are there for a good reason.
Yep.
Because you don't want someone getting an ATAR score of 40 going into a doctor's degree or something.
Yeah. A lot of the time, these kinds of policies have good intentions. We're trying to help out people that come from less fortunate backgrounds, but the problem with the left, with these kind of policies, is they always seem to fail to look at the results of them. and they just continue to repeat them because, I mean, I'm not familiar with, or even if we have enough data on those kinds of policies in Australia, but I'll give you one example in the United States, which was these affirmative action policies that put some young black people into universities in the United States. And so one of the more interesting cases is MIT. Now, to get into MIT, some courses in MIT, you need to finish in the top 1% in the United States in math, right? Now, so this is very elite. You have to be very good. These are the kind of kids who go in a first-year university course, and, you know, there's no time to waste on explaining shit. You have to know what you're doing. You have to pick it up straight away. Now, they put some black people in there because they got to have their quota of minorities. And these black kids were really smart kids. They finished in the top 10% of the United States in maths. But there's a big difference between the top 10% and the top 1%. And so they put these kids in these classes, and what they found that half of these black kids were on academic probation after a year, i.e. they just couldn't keep up with the work. And so what you've done is you've put kids who are very bright, you know, and could handle a university course at a good university, but now you've put them in a situation where they're failing because they're in an elite university, and you're doing them a disservice. I mean, they could have went to, you know, I don't know, Brown University or something and killed it and been, you know, top of the class, but they've stuck them in MIT, and they just can't keep up.
Yeah, I had a well, obviously a different experience, but sort of similar, where when I changed schools, I was really good at maths, but they put me in the harder maths class, which is called Maths Methods. And I wasn't good at that. I was getting 30% on just about every test. I didn't pass it. And the whole year I was trying to go to the normal maths where I would have gotten 80 or 90% on a test. And because there was that many students in the normal maths class, that there wasn't room for me. Right. And I just thought that was a bit unfair. So that delayed me a whole year in maths. And then when I went to general maths the following year, I had no idea what was going on because I had missed the previous year.
Yeah, you've been pushed too hard, in other words. Yeah. Pushed past your...
Because I think people know their limits. And I knew my limits, and I didn't want to go into the harder class for that reason.
Well, I mean, it is, I would say this to you, that it is good to push your limits. It's like sport. It's if you want to learn to be a better golfer, play golf with people who are better than you, you know. That you're going to learn more off those than playing with people who hack around the course. So it's good to push your limits, but, you know, once you've pushed them and realised that you're not up to it, you should be able to fall back.
But there is one thing I do believe in the topic of university entries. I do believe in financial help if you not based on race. If you're Aboriginal, I don't think that should matter. I think it should matter if your situation, just say in year 11 and 12, where your situation is that you live in an abusive home or something, and you can't afford a job, or even if you're just under the poverty line or around the poverty line, and the poverty line in Australia, surprisingly, isn't that low. No. It's not as low as people would think.
No. Well,
and technically, I think a year ago, my family counted in the poverty section, and I'm like, this is absolutely ridiculous. Yep. All of us have an iPhone.
Right.
How are we in the poverty section?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Well, see, this is what's not... this is what people need to understand about so-called poverty. I mean, this is basically a bunch of economists sitting in a room, you know, coming up with some arbitrary number. I mean, it's not arbitrary. They use, you know, statistics about wages and growth of wages over time and who's in the bottom and the top 20% and all these sort of things. But no account is taken of the fact that, look, I was born in the 1970s. My parents had bought a house in about 1970, 71, and they bought what would have been considered a regular house back then, which was 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, lounge room, dining room, no air conditioning, no garage, just something you drive your car underneath. No lock-up garage, nothing like that. No security, no fire alarms, nothing like that. I think they even had to put in their own heater. There wasn't a heater that came with the place. Now that's a standard house. Now you fast forward to today. The standard house in Australia is a 4-bedroom house with a double lock-up garage, central heating, cooling. All the modern appliances often these days just come with the house. Dishwashers, ovens, whatever. You don't have to put them in. Now that right there is completely different standard of living. I think if you go back, the poor 40, 50 years ago probably didn't have a car. Today, most of them do. Like you said, you've got a fucking computer in your pocket, and you live with your mum. And is that right? You live with your mum? Your mum?
I live with my mum and my sister and my nephew.
Okay, so your mum has a phone too, I suppose. Your sister has a phone.
Yeah, we've all got iPhones, and they're expensive phones.
Yeah, you've got TVs, you've got a laptop, you've got all these things. You're not starving, are you? You're not begging for food on the street.
No.
Yeah.
We're far from starving.
Yeah, the point is that poverty today is not poverty 30 or 40 years ago. That's what people... So when people go, oh, today, in 1970 there were 18% living in poverty and now it's 21. Really? Because I bet you the people living... There would have been people in 1970 who weren't below the poverty line who would have preferred the standard of living for the poor today.
And I think it comes down to budgeting. If my mum is really good at budgeting, if she wasn't good at budgeting, we wouldn't have half the things that we have.
Yep.
And there are a lot of people that are on welfare benefits that don't know how to budget.
Yeah.
And that they choose having the latest phone over having quality food.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest problems.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Consumerism is part of it. Just think about... I find it stunning that people they accumulate credit card balances that they pay. All they do is they pay the interest every month, and they just let this accumulate out. To me, that's utter insanity. You end up, you buy some piece of... you buy a new tablet and you throw it on the credit card, an iPad or something, $400 or $500, and you end up paying, because of the interest that you pay on it, you're accruing every month, you end up paying fucking $1,000 over time. This is the kind of stuff that should be taught in school instead of this gender bullshit. How to budget, how to not spend money you don't have, how not to run up excessive debts. There's a big problem in our society with the level of... People want to come out of high school, get a job, and buy a brand new $600,000 house. It's just not realistic.
And I've got a lot of friends that live in those nice new homes, and they don't understand what, I guess, in my opinion, a regular non-modern house is. They look at the house I live in, for example, and they're like, how could you live in something like that? and the house I live in is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's got a split system. The walls aren't painted white. It doesn't have tiles, and it doesn't have a dishwasher or anything like that. But it's a perfectly fine house.
Yep. Well, see, when I hear young people like you talk like that gives me hope. Because that's the kind of attitude you need to have. It's an unfortunate thing that the more prosperous society becomes, the kind of friends you're talking about have less appreciation of where we've come from, because they're just born into this, this beautiful 4-bedroom house with 4 or 5 bedroom house with a pool in the backyard and all the rest of it, and the 2 cars, and you just think that this is normal, and they actually come to see this as sort of shitty, and they want more.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with wanting more, but there's something about tempering expectations with reality.
And I think their parents are really hard workers. They've got two parents that go to full-time jobs so they can afford to have those things. Of course, they don't own the house, they don't own the cars, they don't own half the stuff. It's all on
Yep.
credit, but they can work enough to support
Yep.
that.
Yep. Yep.
And but then some of the parents are really good. They get their children to work, and so they don't leave the nest expecting things.
Yep.
Whereas I see some other people where they're just given everything, and then as soon as they leave home, they just majorly drop, and they become they become so bad that they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the problems.
Yeah, I mean, I remember as a teenager, I wanted an electric guitar, and my parents said, "Yeah, well, go and earn some money and get yourself one. We're not buying it for you." So that's what I did. I marched out. 14 and 9 months, you could get a job in New South Wales, and went and got myself a job. And my first $500, I bought a shit hot guitar. That it teaches you something about the value of money and value of labor and the value of saving.
And another thing, I had a paper round when I was younger. I saved up $1,000 doing a paper round, getting I think I was getting $30 a week, which is actually quite a bit for a paper round. And I did that purely because I just wanted something to do after school other than homework. And I was in primary school at the time, so homework wasn't really a big thing on my agenda. And I saved up $1,000, and I was able to buy an iPod. And now you get parents that are giving their 2-year-olds iPads, and it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, look, people who are born into wealthy families, or just even middle class, and the parents are able to do these things for their kids. That's great. I think parents like to be able to do these things for their kids. I think it's how you do it. I mean, it's okay to buy your kid a car, but I think you've probably got to teach them something about where this money comes from. Cars just don't drop out of the sky. They need to be taught a bit of responsibility, because when you go out in the big wide world and people aren't just giving you shit for free, it could be a bit of a shock.
I think that's exactly right, that people need to learn. I think most people know. I just think that some people are lazy. That when you work and earn something, that there's a certain reward in it other than getting the thing that you want.
Exactly.
And I think now we'll go to the topic of racism that's infiltrated hip hop, especially Australian hip hop.
Hip hop. All right. So let's just stop there for a second. So just put a caveat out there. I know nothing about the hip hop scene in Australia or the United States. So can you set up, like, when you say you're into hip hop, it's not that you listen to it. There's a whole scene that you belong to.
Well, I listen to hip hop music and I make hip hop music. I sort of feel like an outcast from the scene though, because I don't associate with a lot of people in the scene. There are some people that are really nice people in the scene, but they're just buying into all the SJW type stuff.
Right. And
there's one guy in particular, Jim Blah. He's an indigenous rapper from Adelaide, and he often makes posts about racism, and some of the times he's absolutely right. Australia does have a not a huge problem, but Australia does have a problem with racism. But it's not a ridiculously big problem. No one's saying that it doesn't exist at all.
Yeah.
It's just not as big as what some people make it out to be. He posted this on the 2nd of February. If you are the oppressor, you have absolutely no right to dictate how the oppressed should be dealing with their oppression. Well, okay, that's absolutely ridiculous. I do understand a little bit of that. But if if you feel like you're being oppressed, and then like we've seen in America, and go and smash up shops and whatsoever,
Yep.
I feel that people should, and it's not necessarily that you're the oppressor. It's you're you're in a society that has a disproportion of culture between the different races. Then it says, nor are you able to decide what may or may be deemed oppressive. Well, if you look up the dictionary definition of oppressive, it says what oppressive is, so no one can really deem it apart from the dictionary.
Well, but again, this is just an attempt, as with all this social justice nonsense, is to prioritize feelings over facts. So, for example, in law, when it comes to deciding what is racial discrimination or something, there is some objective standard that always has to be met, like something called a reasonable person test. What a reasonable person would find to be, for example, inciting hatred or inciting violence against another race of people. But this whole movement, and you see it with, for example, in Canada, where this listen and believe, so basically if a woman says she's been sexually assaulted or raped, she has to be believed, and that the person being accused is automatically guilty. That so feelings, my feelings, take priority over any kind of legal standard, over any kind of factual evidence. And this is the same here, that you're saying there, that no one can tell anyone else what is oppressive or not. And it's like, well, no one can tell you how you should react. I mean, you're going to react the way you're going to react. But we can say that, for example, your reaction is disproportionate to what's been said.
And some reactions are not really just reactions. Like, for example, if someone goes and shoots my mother, I'm not going to shoot the person's mother of whom shot my mother, because that's an absolutely ridiculous thing to do, and that would lower me down to their level.
Yep.
The next paragraph is one that I really, really don't like. But he says, basically, white Australia has no say as to what may or may not be deemed racist and or oppressive in nature when it comes to issues regarding racism in this country, especially regarding First Nation people. So that's basically putting Native people at a higher respect to everyone else.
That's racist. I mean, racism at its core is different from discrimination. And then racism traditionally has always meant that you're placing yourself above another race, right? Or you're saying another race is less than you in some way. I mean, that's sort of the essence of racism before it's been co-opted with this power plus privilege bullshit. But I mean, and that's what he's saying. And so this is what I don't like about the current and conservatives on the right who should be standing up for this have been weak on it, which is you have to push back on those types of people and say you're the racist. What you're saying is, because this is a shut up white boy statement in essence, is that white people, you're not allowed to have opinions on this, which is that is bigoted. And I think falls under the definition of being racist in itself.
And this next paragraph, I would say, goes under a conspiratory manner. It sort of, in essence, it says that there's a white supremacist movement controlling TV and whatever. So he says, here's why. Racism is high incarceration rates. Well, it depends what you mean. If you're looking at the amount of crime in comparison to incarceration rates, and if they correlate, then is there anything wrong with that? No. I think there's a cultural difference, not a race difference. Yep. Racism is 200 plus of forced assimilation into white society. I wouldn't say our society is white society. I would say it's sort of, I wouldn't say it's a colored society.
No,
I would just say it's a society. You can't say it's a white
no.
society because it doesn't work in favor of white people at all.
Mm.
There are individual instances, of course. Uh, Being stripped of your culture, language, land, and all that you hold dear. Well, there are some elements of every culture that are bad, so I think we should be stripping people of bad culture, but I do understand stripping people of their good culture,
Mm.
we should be doing. Um, Racism is deaths in custody. That the deaths in custody thing is one that I personally I look at and say, well, what do you mean by deaths in custody? Do they die of natural causes, or do they die of suicide where someone intentionally kills herself? And
Mm.
suicide is bad, don't get me wrong, but if they do it themselves, you can't blame anyone. But if someone actually kills someone in custody, then I'm totally against that. That's
Yeah,
horrible.
but look,
So
here's the lowdown on that. Now, there was an inquiry before you were born into Aboriginal deaths in custody, and the findings of that inquiry was the disproportionate amount of Aboriginals that were dying in custody was because there was a disproportionate amount of Aboriginals in custody. That's it. And so there was no, they weren't dying at high at they weren't being sort of systematically taken out the back of a jail cell and fucking beaten to death, something like that, some nefarious, or being neglected to the point where they were offing themselves. The fact is that, there were more Aboriginals dying as a percentage of the population in jails, yes, but it was exactly in line with the amount of Aboriginals in jail. There was no mystery here, and that was the finding. And like this idiot. I mean, there are so many things that you've just said now that guy said that he's just completely and utterly wrong on. He's just mouthing platitudes. I mean, he doesn't even know what he's talking about. But why don't we get to, because this is something you're into hip hop, and so the whole point
yes.
of this is to say that even in your short lifespan, I mean, how long would you say you've been into hip hop?
Well, I guess I started writing lyrics and stuff like that around when I was about 11 or 12 years old. I wasn't really big into hip-hop at that stage. I've always listened to it. The first album I owned was a Gorillaz album,
All right.
which they were sort of an alternative
So
hip-hop
we're
group.
saying, we're talking about 7 years here, and so you're saying that this kind of infiltration of social justice that this particular hip hop artist is injecting, this is a relatively new thing in the 7 years that you've been listening to hip hop.
Yeah, I believe so, because when I first started listening to hip-hop, I was listening to the likes of 50 Cent, Eminem, G-Unit. They didn't really touch on any of this stuff. They did touch on some of the I guess some of the racism and disadvantage, but it wasn't necessarily race specific. Some of it was more to do with class.
Right.
Like some people are born into poverty, but uh, a lot of people get out of poverty.
Right.
Um, then the next statement: racism is being taught to believe you are of lesser value. Okay, that's true. But then he says, and then believing it. Well, don't believe it, because it's not true.
Yeah.
Racism is your oppressor claiming to not see your color nor your identity in order to deny themselves of the privilege they bask in daily, to basically pretend that your current struggle does not exist nor have merit.
No, I mean that's so wrong, because it no one's denying a struggle. I mean, the thing is to, instead of wallowing in victimhood, is to celebrate the struggle. I mean, this is how greatness comes about. People who struggle against odds, people who come up from, look, I come up, I'm not a success in any way. I'm just a regular guy, but I came from working class. No one paid for my university. No one paid for anything at any of my possessions during my teenage years. I went out and got a part-time job. This is not I'm not saying this is a major struggle, but it's these are the things you have to do to overcome your station in life and move up. And yes, if you're Aboriginal, no doubt in Australia, your average Aboriginal person comes from a disadvantaged background, in the sense that they're probably from a lower socioeconomic class, almost definitely. There of course there are exceptions, but the thing about the struggle is that it makes you into a better person. It equips you to be a contributing member of society. This guy and sort of the surrogates around him are the ones that are telling you to wallow in victimhood. And at the end of the day, as you can see with sort of Black Lives Matter movement, the end game is a shakedown. It's give us stuff, reparations. That's what it's about.
Then he goes on to say, racism is TV, newspapers, radio, politics, law, all directed by a white supremacist narrative.
Yeah, it's...
Is he serious?
Well, I hope... where is he putting this? He's putting this on Twitter? He's putting it on Facebook?
This is on Facebook.
Does he get any shit back, or what?
Well, I'll go into the comment section. Someone says, very valid point, but what is being called a white dog C word when I don't have a cigarette? Okay, that doesn't...
Oh, I know what he means. Like he's walking past an Aboriginal who says, "Hey mate, you got to smoke," and the guy says no, and then he calls him, white dog or whatever. Yeah.
Then someone says, is it really racism that is responsible for average life expectancy? Always thought it was genetics anyway. F your mantra, you white dog, give me back my land. Okay. There's a lot of people that are saying, so well said, truth, love hearts, who obviously don't understand it.
Virtue signaling.
There was another post that he made that a lot of... This was a bit earlier. So this post was on February 2nd. There was another post on the 16th of October 2014. And this is even more cancerous. He takes a screenshot of a photo and it says, the racist singlet that's not social media meltdown after Woolworths pull controversial garment from its shelves, and the t-shirt says, if you don't love it, leave. And that's not a racist statement. That's basically saying that a lot of the values that we hold in Australia are really good values, like not throwing gay people off rooftops. That's a great
That's a pretty good value.
And
that's a good one.
Statement, if anything, you would call it bigoted, but I wouldn't even call it bigoted. But he says in the description, he says, white people will never truly know what racism is. I'm sorry. I didn't know that.
Well, I can tell you what.
Why?
Yeah, I mean, it's just this
white supremacy.
It's just this automatic assumption that because you're the dominant, demographic in a society, that somehow you don't know what racism. I lived in Japan. I can tell you, I know what racism is. I was literally a smaller minority of the Japanese population than Aboriginals are in Australia. So I know what discrimination is. I'm not saying it's the same type of discrimination. Sometimes Japanese people treat you with more respect than you probably deserve because you're a foreigner. But sometimes you're completely left out because you're a foreigner. So this idea that... But it sets up this narrative, of course, that you can't be racist towards white people, so you can just call them whatever the fuck you want. For some reason, you don't have to hold yourself to the same standards. It's kind of the soft bigotry of low expectations turned on yourself, in a way. But since we're running up to 1 hour 40 now, which is longer than I thought we'd go, but if we could just maybe tie this off, this bit about hip hop, and I wanted you to, you've given specific comments, but I guess what people would like to know is, because this is an area I certainly don't talk about, but this infiltration of social justice and say this kind of rhetoric, you've seen that ratchet up in the last few years. Is that something you've seen?
Yeah, I have seen that. For example, in the 1990s, Eminem, who's known for being a shock rapper, he says stuff to make people go, "Oh, why did you say that?" Uh, he was attacked by the religious right in the 90s for some of the stuff that he said, but he says stuff out of humor and to shock people. He said in one of his songs in the 90s, "Hate facts, the answer's yes. I don't give an F if you're a hermaph or transvest." I probably got those lyrics wrong. But then later in the song he says, "What's up, Ken? I like gay men," or something like that. And he says stuff on both ends of the on both sides of the table. But then in one of his newest songs, he made a statement about Nicki Minaj, and he said that he would like to, I guess, have sex with her. And you would expect the reaction now. This was in 2010, so you would expect the reaction now be like, "Whoa!" And Nicki Minaj and Eminem have recorded music together, so I don't think that she would listen to it and say, oh, "Okay, yep, that's bad." And now it's the other side of politics that are attacking him. It's the far left. So in the 90s it was the far right, but now it's the far left, and it's sort of had a flip.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, you can go back further than that. When in the 1980s, heavy metal came out, and it was the Christian right, conservative right. I think Tipper Gore was actually the sort of the head this up, the NAACP. Somebody will correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but you know, all these kids that were listening to heavy metal music, these going to turn your kids into devil worshippers, you know, because, you know, in heavy metal bands, for example, the pentagram was just a symbol that was used. Like Motley Crue had the fucking pentagram all the time. I mean, there was nothing even fucking slightly devil worshipy about any of these groups. I mean, Motley Crue had a song called "Shout at the Devil," for Christ's sake. But yeah, it was the same kind of thing. They vilified the shit out of heavy metal bands. They got some bands banned from venues. You know, no platforming in the 1980s. I remember a band called Wasp, and they used to, like, the lead singer used to drink blood on stage, and I think he got it from Ozzy Osbourne, who'd been doing it earlier. And they'd throw out raw meat into the stage, all this kind of thing. And he wore chainsaw blades on his arms and shit. You know, it looked kind of menacing, and there was blood and stuff, and they had songs that, you know, involved hell and all kinds of stuff. But I mean, this was a rebellion youth movement in the 80s. It was very, very harmless. And again, yeah, these, you know, the conservatives came in. You're exactly right. I mean, the sort of the police, the thought police, were on the right, and today it's on the left. Yeah. Yeah,
it's totally it's had a flip.
Yeah.
And then there was a rapper, SO, member of Sydney hip hop group Bliss and SO. He posted a photo on Instagram of him standing in front of Rihanna, the wax doll, in a wax museum. I believe the wax museum might have been on the Gold Coast. I'm not entirely sure. And he had his fist up to Rihanna, and the caption on the image said, "She loves the way it hurts," or something like that, which was a quote from one of her songs.
Yeah.
And basically the whole hip hop scene attacked him and said, "Well, that's wrong." And he obviously wasn't encouraging violence against women. He wasn't encouraging violence against anyone. He was just using it as a joke.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And of course it's going to upset some people, but isn't all comedy going to upset
Well, I mean,
someone?
that's the the purpose of comedy is to try and sort of alleviate suffering in a way. If we can laugh, it alleviates sadness. And if comedians don't push the boundaries of what is and isn't acceptable speech, then who can really? Obviously this guy's not a comedian, but the point is that humor, it's something really vital in our society. It's a vital part of freedom of speech, and there are a certain part of our society that's trying to take it away. You saw, you live in Melbourne, so it's closer to home to you, that Eddie Maguire's comment about holding a woman's head underwater, it was a joke, right? Because he had this long-standing feud with this journalist, and he said this on a radio show. They were talking because he actually participated in one of those ice bucket challenges where you slide down a slippery dip into some cold water. It was all for charity. It was all good fun. And he'd made the sort of off-the-cuff comment that, oh, yeah, it'd be good to see her there, and then someone could hold her head underwater. And the idea that, because this was a massive, the outrage, this promotes violence against women, and it's like, no, people don't hear a joke at the footy and then run home and beat their wife. It's not the way it works. I mean, we've studied domestic violence, but the hysterical outrage industry would have you believe this. It's really odd.
And that's why I like I guess comedians like Alex Williamson, he hasn't really been represented that much in the comedy scene outside of YouTube because of some of the stuff that he does is a bit dark. But I like how he pushes boundaries. He did this one video about being an parent of an Olympian a few days ago, and he was basically saying that in order to have an Olympian for a child, you need to beat your child if they don't do the right thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure someone's going to make a big deal about that video.
Yeah, well, it's just the times we live in. But I mean, those are times that people you need to support. You need to go out and see them in concert, and you need to, if you're going to fork over your dollars for a show, it's the people who push boundaries that you need to support. We might wrap it up here. We've gone, I think now. Let me have a look here. 1:46. I know we probably have a couple other things to talk about, but I think we hit most of the things that we brought up. We're up to 1:45. We'll see how this goes. I mean, out there to the audience, I'm going to put this up, and tell us if you like it, tell us if you don't. Tell me that I talk too much and I should let the guest talk, because I've never done this before. I probably should. But anyway, maybe, and if there are other people interested in getting in contact with me and having these type of interviews, or maybe I can just read things out on my channel that's happening to you at school. If you're a young guy, in the workplace, that might be something that could be interesting and people be worth listening to. But I want to thank Cody for giving up his time and volunteering. He's putting himself out there. He is who he says he is. He's not an anonymous pussy like me. And yeah. Thanks a lot, Cody. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Independent Man.
Thanks, mate.